Let's move on to Spain and kind of talk about where Spain is coming from as a nation over the long course of its history. And I'm going to go back pretty far here, but I'm trying to establish some sort of some basic cultural context ideas that inform what it means to be Spanish, especially what it means to be Spanish during the Golden Age. So, well before the Golden Age, early Spain is ruled by all kinds of different outsiders. It's conquered by Carthage, who was that northern African kingdom that the Romans destroyed later on. And then after Carthage goes away, then it is conquered by Rome. This is a picture of an ancient Roman wall in Spain. And so the Romans ruled for a long time. And then some of those tribal cultures out of Europe had a little bit of influence as well, the Visigoths. So we've got a long-standing history of being ruled by outsiders that continues from 711 to 1248, when Muslims invade from North Africa and dominate the entire Iberian Peninsula for a period of over 500 years. And during that period, a lot of really interesting stuff happens. And I've got an image of an old Islamic building, and you can see the clear Muslim architectural influences here. A lot of those buildings are still around, and when the Catholics took back over, they actually frequently just converted them from being a mosque to being a church. One of the things that created this Muslim dominance created, though, was an interesting cultural mixing. Like I said, you see it in the architecture. To some degree, you see it in bloodlines, and we'll talk about that later. But almost immediately after this happens, in the 1200s, organized Catholic resistance begins to fight, and we have a long period of wars between Islamic invaders and Catholic native Spanish. And this goes on, like I said, for a long time, a couple hundred years, until in 1479 we get the marriage of Ferdinand and Isabella, who are really important partially because their unity creates what's almost close to a Spanish nation. Ferdinand is from Aragon, which is one territory or province, and Isabella is from Castile. And so their unification creates an opportunity for the development of what is almost a Spanish nation. We tend to think of countries as what they look like on the map today. But for centuries and centuries and even thousands of years, people much more identified themselves by more regional definitions or regional territories. And even in today, for instance, the cultural differences in Spain between, say, Barcelona and Madrid, it almost doesn't quite feel like the same country in some regards. But nonetheless, Ferdinand and Isabella get together and move things towards a powerful direction, both militarily and economically, for Spain. This helps in 1492 when the last remnants of Moorish or Islamic armies are expelled from the Spanish Peninsula, sent back to North Africa. And so now we have Spanish and Portuguese people totally ruling the Iberian Peninsula. And the other big thing that happens here, obviously, is that the New World is discovered. And I put discovered in sort of sarcastic quotes because there were lots of people who already knew it was there. But as you know the story, what happens is Spain and Portugal are the first nations to really take advantage of the tremendous amount of wealth that they can mine from North, Central, and South America. Specifically gold, but all kinds of other natural resources, and they just start making tons and tons of money. And one of the things that happens from that is, by the 1500s, we have Spain as a world power. Spain is the dominant nation in terms of naval strength, in terms of military strength, and they're bringing so much money home from the New World that they are also one of the dominant economic powers. And so this is the way that Spain is sort of situated when we get into the beginning of the Spanish Golden Age. Interestingly enough, the two guys who ruled during the 1500s didn't do a very good job. So Philip II comes to power in 1556. He ascended to the throne when his dad abdicated. King Carlos said, "I'm out, I'm done." He just walked away from the throne and his son took over. One of the reasons Carlos walked away is because from that late 1490s, early 1500s period to the mid-1500s, Spain had kind of overextended itself. And so Philip II inherits lots of resources in the New World, but also lots of debt from overextending credit to try to bring resources home from the New World, and a number of rebellions abroad. And it's worth noting that at the height of its powers, Spain had colonial control or direct military control over lots and lots of countries and regions, including but not limited to Holland, Belgium, Burgundy, Austria, Bohemia, parts of Hungary, some of Milan, Naples, Sicily. So at the height of its power, under King Carlos, before Philip II, Spain is a kind of surprisingly far-flung military and imperial power. Like I said, Philip II finds things have been overextended a little bit. He inherits quite a few problems. He also has to start putting down a number of different internal rebellions, which is a problem. So Spain is now, again, still a fairly dominant country, but starting to slide a little bit. And as you'll notice, in Philip II's rule, he makes two significant political errors. First, he marries Mary Tudor. That's the Catholic Queen of England, who, as you may have noted, didn't end up being the queen for very long because she was killed, and then Elizabeth took over and England became Protestant. So that was an ill-advised political marriage. It didn't work out. And then thing number two that he did was he sent the Spanish Armada to invade England, which completely failed. So Philip II's got some problems. He makes some bad choices, and we see at the end of Philip's rule that Spain is really starting to move back into itself and become a much more isolationist nation. And by isolationist, I mean people stop bringing foreign books into the country. If you wanted to import foreign knowledge, it was heavily regulated. And if you were a Spaniard and you wanted to go to university, you couldn't go anywhere other than Bologna, which was the university in Spain. So under Philip II, the Spanish people are really sort of retracting and retreating into themselves in a bunch of different ways. Then Philip III, Philip II's son, comes along, and he's next, and he has an awesome collar. But other than that, he does even worse than Philip II. He spends and spends and spuns lots and lots of money. He doesn't care about ruling. He's more interested in wealth and parties. He is the head of an extraordinarily corrupt government. The Spanish people suffer all kinds of famine, a drought, poverty. The Spanish agriculture falls apart, and basically the everyday people are in big trouble. One of the things we see during the rule of Philip III is that because the Spanish people, and especially the nobility, because they can't have the wealth that their immediate predecessors had. Spain used to be awesome, and now under Philip III, it's kind of fallen apart. So you get a lot of Spanish nobles who are mad that they're not as wealthy and not as powerful as the people who came before them. So instead, they turn to an obsession with honor, with purity of blood, an obsession with nobility, obsession with religion. And we'll talk about those different contexts here in a minute. But what you end up getting here is a nation that doesn't seem to have any good reason to have a golden age. It used to be powerful, now it's not. It used to be internationally involved, now it's not. It used to be a little bit free thinking, and now we're starting to really control intellectual thought in Spain. So one of our questions going forward is, how on earth is this a golden age? And it's a question we need to sort of find different ways to answer and consider. So we'll talk about some of those ways in the next segment of the lecture.